The silent guard. Kato stood in the dimly lit room, his sharp eyes scanning every movement. The club was alive with soft alien music and the quiet hum of conversation. Strange creatures filled the space. Tall reptilian beings, floating jellyfish-like diplomats, and armored warlords with glowing eyes. This was the Silver Lotus, an exclusive alien club where only the richest and most dangerous beings came to be entertained. Kato wasn't one of them. He was just a bodyguard, a human, standing in the shadows, protecting someone who paid him well. His client tonight was Tyra, a Geisha, an alien performer with shimmering blue skin and golden eyes. She moved with grace, her silk-like robes flowing as she poured drinks and spoke in soft, mesmerizing tones. Kato had guarded many people before, criminals, smugglers, warlords, but Cyra was different. She was too calm, too observant. Unlike other entertainers, she didn't just perform. She studied everyone in the room, as if looking for something. He didn't ask questions. It wasn't his job to care. But something about tonight felt wrong. A job like any other. Kato adjusted the grip on his pulse pistol, hidden beneath his jacket. His military training told him to always be ready, always expect the worst. Then they entered. 3 Serkai warlords walked in, tall, armored aliens with skin like black stone. Their leader, General Vortek, was infamous for wiping out entire colonies. The room grew quieter as he moved toward Cyra's table. Cyra's smile didn't falter, but Kato saw the slight tension in her fingers as she poured the warlord a drink. "An honor to have you here, General," Cyra said smoothly, her voice honey-sweet. Vortek didn't respond immediately. His glowing red eyes studied her, as if searching for something. Kato moved slightly closer. He had protected Cyra for 3 weeks now, but this was the first time she looked nervous. "Why?" The general finally spoke, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. "I hear you know things, little Geisha." Cyra didn't flinch. She simply tilted her head. "I know many things. It is my job to listen." Kato tensed. That wasn't the right answer. A performer should act dumb, harmless. But Cyra had challenged the warlord with her words. Vortek chuckled, but there was no humor in his voice. He lifted his drink but didn't sip it. Instead, he whispered something in his native tongue. Kato didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. Threat. The first sign of trouble. Kato's earpiece crackled. A low, urgent voice spoke. Unknowns entering from the south wing. Weapons detected. Trouble. Kato didn't hesitate. His fingers lightly tapped the side of his jacket. A silent warning to Cyra. She glanced at him, her golden eyes understanding the signal. A second later, the lights flickered. The music stopped. Then, boom. An explosion shook the entire building. Screams filled the air. Tables overturned. Smoke spread fast, blurring vision. Kato moved on instinct, pulling Cyra behind him just as gunfire erupted. The attackers weren't just random criminals. They were assassins, moving with trained precision, their dark suits blending into the smoke. They were after Cyra. Kato didn't know why. He didn't care. He had one job: keep her alive. A shadow moved through the smoke. Kato fired first. One shot, straight to the head. The assassin dropped. More came. 3, 4, 5. Kato dodged, weaving through the chaos. His pulse pistol hummed with each shot, taking down another attacker. They were too well-equipped, too organized. This wasn't a robbery. This was an execution. Cyra ducked behind a broken table, her breathing fast but controlled. "You need to tell me what's going on," Kato growled, covering her as another round of bullets rained down. Cyra hesitated. Then, for the first time, she looked afraid. "They found me," she whispered. Kato's stomach tightened. "Who?" Another explosion ripped through the wall, sending debris flying. Kato shielded Cyra, feeling the heat of the blast against his back. The building was coming down. They had to move. Now. The chase begins. Kato grabbed Sarah's wrist. Run. They dashed through the crumbling club, dodging panicked guests and falling beams. More assassins appeared, blocking the exits. Kato didn't stop. He grabbed a metal tray from a table and threw it. It smashed into an assassin's face. In the same motion, he twisted, kicking another enemy hard in the chest. Zyra followed closely, her movements graceful despite the chaos. A doorway ahead, their only chance. But just as they reached it, a figure stepped into their path. A tall assassin, his weapon raised, his face hidden behind a dark mask. Kato barely had time to react. The assassin fired. A sharp pain exploded in Kato's shoulder. He gritted his teeth, didn't slow down. He lunged forward, tackling the assassin, slamming his head against the wall. Gunfire behind them. No time. He grabbed Sarah again, pushing forward, out of the building, into the neon-lit streets of the alien city. They weren't safe. Not even close. The attack. The neon lights of the alien city burned bright, reflecting off the wet pavement. The Silver Lotus Club lay in ruins behind them, smoke curling into the sky, alarms blaring. Kato barely had a second to catch his breath before the next wave of danger arrived. A hover car screeched to a stop in front of them, its black armor gleaming under the city lights. The doors slid open, and 4 heavily armed figures stepped out, their weapons raised. Zyra tensed beside him. "They won't stop," she murmured. Kato's grip tightened on his pistol. His shoulder throbbed from the earlier shot, but he ignored the pain. Pain didn't matter. Staying alive did. The leader of the squad took a step forward, his helmet reflecting the streetlights. His voice was distorted through a mechanical filter. "Hand over the girl." Kato didn't respond. He was already calculating. 4 enemies, well armed, but the street was narrow. Limited movement. He could work with that. Zyra shifted slightly behind him. "Kato." He knew what she was going to say. "Don't fight. Run." But there was no running now. The first strike. The squad leader barely had time to blink before Kato moved. He fired twice, each shot precise. One to the knee of the nearest enemy, the other straight through the second's visor. The wounded alien dropped his rifle, screaming. The second crumpled instantly, a smoking hole where his eye had been. Chaos erupted. The remaining 2 fired back, red plasma bolts scorching the air. Kato spun, yanking Zyra behind a street barrier as bolts of energy shattered the pavement where they had just stood. "Stay low," he barked. Zyra nodded, pressing against the wall as another blast tore through a neon sign above them, sending shards of glowing metal raining down. Kato leaned out, squeezing the trigger. 3 more shots. One assassin dodged, rolling behind the hover car, but the other took a hit to the shoulder, his gun sparking as he dropped it. That was Kato's chance. He surged forward, closing the distance in an instant. He grabbed the injured enemy by the collar and slammed his head into the car's frame, knocking him out cold. 1 left. The squad leader snarled and lunged at Kato, pulling out a plasma dagger. Kato barely dodged as the blade sliced the air near his throat, leaving a sizzling trail. He blocked the next strike with his forearm, gritting his teeth as the energy from the blade burned through his sleeve. With a swift movement, Kato drove his knee into the alien's stomach, making him stagger. Then, in one brutal motion, he grabbed the leader's head and slammed it against the car's door, once, twice, until the body went limp. Silence. The battle was over. For now. No safe place left. Kato turned to Zyra, breathing hard. She looked at him, her golden eyes filled with something unreadable. "You're hurt," she said, glancing at the burn on his arm. "I'll live," he muttered, already checking the bodies for weapons and credits. He pocketed a few energy cells and a small data chip. Zyra sighed. They'll send more. He already knew that. This wasn't a random hit squad. Someone powerful wanted her dead. "Who's after you?" he asked, voice sharp. Zyra hesitated. Then she did something unexpected. She stepped forward, placing a soft hand on his injured arm. A strange warmth spread through the burn, and slowly the pain faded. Kato jerked back, staring at her. "What the hell?" "I'll explain," she said, voice urgent. "But not here. We need to move." Kato narrowed his eyes, but nodded. She had secrets. And right now, those secrets were getting them both killed. The chase continues. They sprinted down a side alley, avoiding patrol drones that hovered above, scanning for survivors. Zyra led him through winding streets, her movements swift and precise. She knew exactly where she was going. They finally stopped in front of a small, rundown building. A hidden door slid open as Zyra pressed her palm against a scanner. Inside, the room was small but well-equipped, a safe house. Weapons, medical supplies, and a small holo-terminal blinked in the dim light. Kato folded his arms. "Talk." Zyra let out a slow breath. "You think I'm just an entertainer," she said softly. "But that's not true. I work for someone who knows the truth about the warlords." Kato frowned. "What truth?" Zyra stepped closer, her golden eyes locking onto his. "The Serkai warlords aren't just crime bosses. They're covering up something huge, a massacre, a war crime that could start a galactic rebellion." Kato stiffened. Zyra continued, her voice urgent. "I have proof. That's why they want me dead. If I can get this data to the right people, the warlords will fall." Kato exhaled slowly. This was bigger than he thought. He should have walked away. This wasn't his fight. But something inside him, the soldier, the protector, wouldn't let him. "What do we do?" he asked. Zyra's lips pressed into a thin line. "We get to the human sector, the only place they won't dare follow." Kato nodded. "Then let's move." But as he turned toward the door, the holo-terminal flickered on by itself. A voice filled the room. "Going somewhere." Kato's blood went cold. They had been found. The hidden truth. The air inside the safe house turned ice cold as the holo-terminal continued to flicker. "Going somewhere." The voice was deep, distorted, mechanical. It wasn't a warlord. This was worse. Zyra gasped. No, they shouldn't be able to. Kato was already moving. He grabbed his pistol, scanning the room for threats. The holoscreen glowed brighter, displaying a grainy image. A shadowy figure sat on a throne-like chair, surrounded by darkness. Only its eyes were visible, burning red like twin suns. "You've made a mistake, Bodyguard." The voice was flat, emotionless. Kato felt something cold settle in his chest. Zyra's breathing grew uneven. "That's High Executor Vostal." Kato didn't recognize the name, but from the way Zyra's hands trembled, he understood. This was someone truly dangerous. The holo figure leaned forward. "Hand over the girl, and I will grant you a quick death." Kato smirked. Tempting. But no. The screen glitched, and suddenly the power in the safe house shut down. A warning beep came from Zyra's wrist device. "They've hacked the security grid." Kato cursed under his breath. They were out of time. Then, a metallic crash from outside. The front entrance. They were here. The escape plan. Kato grabbed Zyra's wrist. "How many exits?" "Just one," she said. But he was already moving. Outside, heavy boots stomped across the pavement. Shadows passed the reinforced glass windows. They were surrounded. Zyra yanked her arm free. "Wait. There's something you need to know." Kato didn't have time for this. "Save it." She grabbed a small holodisc from the table and shoved it into his hands. "No. If I die, you have to get this to a human-controlled zone." Kato blinked. "You're not dying." Before she could argue, the door exploded inward. The force sent both of them flying back. Smoke filled the air. Through the haze, figures in dark armor poured in, rifles raised. Their helmets bore the same burning red insignia from the holo message. Kato coughed, grabbing his pistol. No time for careful shots. He fired blindly. 1, 2, 3 rounds. A scream. A body dropped. Geisha pulled out a small circular device and slammed it against the floor. A blinding flash of white light erupted, forcing Kato to shut his eyes. When he opened them, she was already pulling him toward the back wall. Kato shook his head, dazed. That better not be another dead end. Geisha smirked. You humans are always so impatient. She pressed a hidden panel, and the wall split open, revealing a narrow maintenance tunnel. Without hesitation, they ran inside. The depths of the city. The tunnel sloped downward, deeper beneath the city streets. The air turned damp. The sound of distant water dripping echoed in the darkness. Kato kept his gun raised, glancing over his shoulder. No sign of pursuit. Yet. Geisha slowed down. We need to talk. Now. Kato scowled. Yes, because if you don't trust me, we won't survive this. She held up the holodisc she had given him earlier. The small device flickered, and suddenly, a massive star map appeared in the air. It wasn't just any star map. It showed a restricted sector, one that had been erased from official records. Kato frowned. What am I looking at? Geisha pointed at a marked location. The Sci-Fi warlords have been covering up a mass extermination of entire colonies, not just humans, dozens of species. They erased the records, silenced witnesses, and blamed rebels. Kato's jaw clenched. He'd heard rumors of war crimes before, but entire colonies. Geisha continued, voice urgent. I was a witness. I performed for these warlords, and they got careless. I saw the orders, heard the confessions. She gestured to the map. This is the proof. If we can get this to the right people, they'll kill every warlord in the system, Kato finished. Geisha nodded. And stop a genocide before it begins. Silence filled the tunnel. Kato exhaled slowly. This was bigger than just a bodyguard job. It wasn't just about saving one life. It was about stopping an empire of warlords from wiping out millions. And now he was right in the middle of it. Kato sighed, rubbing his face. I really should have taken that desk job. Geisha smiled slightly. Too late now. Kato chuckled. Yeah, too late now. But before they could move forward, a sudden hum filled the air. Kato spun, gun raised. The shadows behind them moved. His stomach dropped. They weren't alone in the tunnels. The escape. The air in the tunnel grew thick. A strange low hum vibrated through the walls, making Kato's skin crawl. He raised his pistol, stepping in front of Geisha. Stay behind me. Geisha didn't argue. Her golden eyes flickered in the dim light, scanning the shadows. The sound grew louder, a metallic screech, like something alive yet mechanical. Then, from the darkness, they emerged. Tall, black-cloaked figures, their forms shifting unnaturally. They had no faces, only featureless, reflective masks. Their movements were wrong, as if gravity barely held them in place. Geisha inhaled sharply. No, it can't be. Kato kept his gun steady. You know what those things are. She nodded, voice barely above a whisper. Void stalkers. Kato frowned. Doesn't sound friendly. It's not. One of the creatures twisted its head unnaturally, its mask reflecting Kato's own face back at him. Then it lunged. Kato fired 3 shots, center mass. The bullets hit and passed straight through. No blood, no impact, nothing. The thing didn't stop. Kato barely dodged as its clawed hand swiped at his throat. He rolled back, pulling Geisha with him. They're not real, she said quickly. They phase in and out of our dimension. Kato gritted his teeth. Fantastic. Any ideas? Geisha glanced at her wrist device, fingers flying across its holographic interface. I might be able to. The stalker's charge. Kato dropped low, sweeping a kick at the nearest one. His leg passed right through it, and the thing barely reacted. They were like ghosts. He fired again, aiming for the legs. Nothing. Zira muttered a curse. Okay, new plan. Run. Kato didn't need to be told twice. Deeper underground. They sprinted through the tunnel, the creatures gliding after them. Fast, too fast. Kato glanced at Zyra. Tell me you've got something. She held up her device. These things operate on an unstable frequency. If I can overload them. A void stalker phased in right in front of them. Kato barely stopped in time, nearly crashing into it. The creature's hand shot out, grasping his shoulder. And for the first time, it was solid. Searing cold burned through Kato's skin, spreading like liquid ice. His vision blurred. He felt his body weakening, like something was draining him. Zyra reacted fast. She slammed her wrist device against the stalker's mask, sending a pulse of energy rippling through its form. The creature shrieking silently, its entire body flickering. Then, suddenly, it vanished. Kato stumbled back, shaking the cold from his limbs. What the hell was that? Zyra pulled him forward. A disruption pulse. It won't work twice. Let's go. They ran again, turning into a side tunnel, dodging low-hanging pipes and flickering lights. Zyra's device beeped. She gasped. Kato, wait. He skidded to a stop just before the tunnel ended in a massive drop-off. Below them stretched an underground chasm, a massive abyss with no visible bottom. Kato looked behind them. The void stalkers were coming fast. Ahead, nothing but a deadly fall. Leap of faith. Kato glanced at Zyra. Can we make it across? She pointed to a distant rusted transport rail stretching across the abyss. There's a chance, if we time it. Kato shook his head. I hate this plan. The first void stalker reached the edge. Kato grabbed Zyra's hand and jumped. The wind rushed past them as they plunged into the darkness. Zyra activated her grav boots at the last second, slowing their fall just enough for Kato to grab onto the rusted rail. He grunted, his arms straining as he dangled over the abyss. Zyra clung to him, her breathing fast. That was insane. Kato smirked. You're welcome. Above them, the void stalkers reached the ledge. They stood there, watching, but did not follow. Zyra frowned. Why aren't they? Then she looked down and froze. Kato followed her gaze. Something else was down here. Something worse. The horror below. The darkness stirred. From the depths, a deep, guttural sound rumbled through the cavern. A shape moved. A massive, towering form with too many limbs, too many eyes. A creature so vast that the air around it warped and twisted. Zyra gripped Kato's arm. That's not possible. It's supposed to be extinct. Kato didn't take his eyes off the horror below. Well, it's not. The thing turned its glowing eyes toward them and roared. The entire cavern shook. Rocks collapsed. The old rail snapped under Kato's weight. They were falling again. Falling straight toward the nightmare below. The betrayal. Falling into darkness. The wind rushed past Kato's ears as he and Zyra plunged into the abyss. The distant glow of the tunnel above shrank rapidly, leaving only darkness below. Kato's instincts screamed. This was death. Then, suddenly, impact. Not the ground. Something else. A force slammed into them from the side, sending them spinning through the air. Kato barely had time to react before his body collided with a metallic surface. Pain shot through his ribs, knocking the air from his lungs. A second later, Zyra hit the surface beside him, rolling into a crouch. They weren't dead. They had landed on something massive, something moving. Kato coughed, trying to regain his breath. He could feel the surface beneath him shifting, vibrating. It was metal. A ship. Zyra's voice was sharp. We're not alone. Kato followed her gaze. In the dim light, figures stood on the deck of the massive vessel. They weren't warlords. They weren't assassins. They were mercenaries. And one of them was pointing a gun right at Cato's head. Captured. A deep voice rumbled through the air. Well, well. Looks like we caught a couple of strays. The leader of the mercenaries stepped forward. A towering brute of a man, cybernetic implants covering half his face. His mechanical eye glowed red, scanning Cato like a machine analyzing a target. Zara tensed. Let us go. The mercenary laughed. Oh, that's funny. Real funny. You see, lady, people pay a lot of credits for your head. And your little bodyguard. He's just a bonus. Cato kept his face neutral, but inside, his mind was racing. How the hell did they know where we'd be? Then he noticed something. Dyra wasn't surprised. She wasn't panicked. She looked angry. Cato narrowed his eyes. You knew they were coming. Zyra didn't answer. The leader turned to his men. Take them to the brig. The buyer will be here soon. The mercenaries moved fast. Cato tried to fight, but 3 of them tackled him at once, slamming him to the ground. Metal cuffs locked around his wrists, and a shock collar snapped around his neck. Zyra didn't resist. She let them take her. That was Cato's second warning. Something was very wrong. The buyer arrives. Hours passed in darkness. Cato sat in the cold metal brig, his hands chained to the wall. His body ached from the fall, and the damned shock collar burned against his skin. Across from him, Syra sat quietly, her eyes closed. She hadn't spoken since they were captured. Cato exhaled. All right, time to start explaining. Zyra finally looked at him. Cato. A loud metallic clank interrupted her. The door to the brig slid open. A figure stepped inside, their presence immediately suffocating. Cato's muscles tensed. It wasn't a mercenary. It was High Executor Vostal, the same shadowy figure who had spoken to them through the holo terminal. Only now he was here in person, and he was smiling. A deal with the devil. Vostal's black robes trailed behind him as he entered the cell. His burning red eyes locked onto Xera first, then shifted to Cato. Ah, the human. Cato glared. The hell do you want? Vostal chuckled. Straight to the point. I admire that. He stepped closer, his boots echoing against the metal floor. I have a proposition for you, bodyguard. Cato stayed silent. Vostal smiled. You've done well, surviving this long, but you don't need to die here. In fact, I could use someone like you. Cato barked out a laugh. Yeah. And what's the job? Selling out the only person keeping me alive. Vostal's smile widened. Exactly. The room fell silent. Cato felt his jaw clench. You want me to betray Xyra? Why not? Vostal's voice was smooth, persuasive. She hasn't been honest with you. She hasn't told you the whole truth. And if you don't make a choice soon, she won't be the one to die. Cato glanced at Xyra. She looked down. She didn't deny it. Vostal leaned in. The mercenaries don't care who gets paid. If you hand her over, I can arrange your freedom. Credits. A new life. No more running. No more fighting. Cato looked him dead in the eye. And if I say no? Vostal smiled wider. Then you die. Slowly. Cato inhaled deeply. His options were clear. And then Tyra spoke. The truth comes out. Her voice was calm. Let me speak to him alone. Vostal chuckled, but nodded. He gestured to the guards. A moment later, they were alone. Cato leaned forward. All right, talk. Syra looked at him, her golden eyes filled with regret. There's something I never told you. Cato crossed his arms. Shocking. Zyra sighed. The evidence I have, it's not just data. It's not just records of war crimes. She took a slow breath. It's something worse. Cato frowned. What do you mean? Zyra's voice dropped to a whisper. It's a list. A list of every corrupted official, every secret assassin, every government traitor who has worked for the warlords. People in power, people in the human sector. Kato's stomach dropped. You're telling me this isn't just about aliens? Zyra shook her head. It's about everyone, humans included. Kato exhaled slowly. Now it made sense. That's why everyone wanted her dead. This wasn't just about justice. It was about power, and anyone who got that list could reshape the entire galaxy. He met Sarah's gaze. You should have told me. I didn't trust you, she admitted. I wanted to, but... She hesitated. You were a soldier once. You followed orders. I didn't know if you'd turn me in. Kato clenched his fists. He wanted to be angry, but part of him understood. Now he had to make a choice. Betray Zyra and save himself, or fight back and take on the most powerful forces in the galaxy. Kato sighed. I really hate my life right now. Zyra smirked. That makes two of us. Suddenly, alarms blared. Outside the brig, explosions rocked the ship. Someone else was attacking. Vostal's voice crackled over the intercom. Kill them both. Kato yanked on his chains. No more waiting. No more running. It was time to fight back. The last stand. The battle begins. The ship trembled violently, metal groaning under the impact of explosions. The alarms blared, filling the brig with flashing red light. Outside, the sounds of gunfire, shouts, and chaos echoed through the corridors. Kato yanked at his chains again, testing the strength of his restraints. They were solid, too solid. No way out. Zyra wasn't struggling. Instead, she had her eyes closed, her breathing steady. Kato frowned. What are you doing? She didn't answer. Another explosion rocked the ship. The ceiling lights flickered. Then, suddenly, the power cut out. Darkness swallowed the brig. Kato heard a sharp click, then the sound of metal snapping. A second later, Zyra stood up, completely free. Kato blinked. How the hell? Zyra knelt beside him, pulling out a small, thin blade she had hidden inside her robe. I'm full of surprises. Kato let out a short laugh. I hate surprises. Zyra smirked. Then you're going to hate this next part. With a sharp twist, she unlocked his chains. Kato jumped to his feet, rolling his shoulders. The shock collar still burned against his skin, but he ignored it. Another loud explosion echoed through the ship. This time, the floor tilted slightly. The ship was losing altitude. Kato cracked his knuckles. We need weapons. Zyra grabbed the mercenary's holopad from the wall and hacked into it. The screen flickered before displaying the ship-wide security map. She scanned it fast. The armory is 2 floors up, she said, but the hangar is directly above us. Kato's instincts kicked in. Then we go up. Zyra looked at him. You're thinking of stealing the ship. Damn right I am. Fighting through the chaos. The brig doors burst open. The first guard outside barely had time to react before Kato grabbed him by the helmet and slammed him into the wall. Another rushed in. Kato ducked, pivoted, and snapped his elbow into the alien's throat. The guard choked, collapsing. Zyra moved with graceful precision, disarming a mercenary in a single motion and flipping his rifle in her hands. 2 more guards charged in. Zyra fired first. A burst of blue plasma lit up the room, striking both mercenaries square in the chest. They collapsed instantly. Kato raised an eyebrow. I thought you were just a performer. Zyra smirked. And I thought you were just a bodyguard. Kato chuckled. Touché. They rushed into the corridor, weaving through the smoke-filled passageways. The ship shook violently as another explosion rattled the hull. The mercenaries were in full panic. Kato grabbed a fallen rifle and checked its power cell. Still half charge. Good enough. The sound of battle grew louder as they approached the upper levels. Kato risked a glance through a broken viewport. Outside, a fleet of human warships hovered in attack formation. He grinned. Looks like someone called in the cavalry. Zyra's expression darkened. No, that's not the cavalry. Kato's grin faded. Then who the hell is it? The true enemy revealed. They reached the hangar deck just as a massive holographic transmission flickered to life in the center of the room. A figure stepped forward on the screen. Kato felt his stomach drop. It was High Executor Vostal. But he wasn't on the ship anymore. He was on the lead vessel of the invading fleet. His voice crackled through the ship's intercom. To all remaining forces, this is Executor Vostal. The operation is complete. Eliminate the witnesses. Kato and Sarai exchanged a look. They were never going to let anyone live, Syra said quietly. Kato tightened his grip on the rifle. Then we make sure we're not the ones who die. The final stand. The hangar bay was a battlefield. Mercenaries fought against unknown invaders, a mix of humans and alien soldiers in black combat armor. The intruders moved with military precision, eliminating anyone in their path. They weren't here to rescue anyone. They were here to clean up the mess. Kato's mind raced. We need a ship. Now. Zyra pointed. They're one of the assault craft. It's fast, small, and armed. Kato gritted his teeth. Not if I can help it. He diverted all power to engines, heading straight for the warship. Zyra's eyes widened. Are you insane? Kato smirked. Probably. With a final burst of speed, their stolen ship shot toward the flagship, weaving through enemy fire. Their only hope, getting close enough to shut Vostal down. Permanently. Humanity fights back. A war among the stars. The stars burned bright, a silent audience to the chaos unfolding. Kato's hands gripped the controls of the stolen assault craft, maneuvering through the debris-filled battlefield. Plasma fire lit up the void, streaks of red and blue flashing past the cockpit. Behind them, Vostal's fleet loomed like a shadow, its capital warship charging its main cannon, a weapon powerful enough to erase an entire colony. Zyra's voice was tense. If that cannon fires, thousands will die. Kato narrowed his eyes. He had spent years fighting for people who couldn't defend themselves. He had protected warlords, criminals, politicians. But today, he was fighting for something real. He exhaled sharply. Then we don't let them fire. Zyra turned to him. You have a plan. Kato smirked. I'm gonna crash this ship into that cannon. Zyra blinked. That's not a plan. That's suicide. Kato shrugged. You got a better idea. She hesitated, then gritted her teeth. Yes. She pulled up a holo display, revealing the warship's reactor core. If we can get inside, we can overload the core and disable the ship. Kato considered it. Less suicidal. More effective. He nodded. All right, let's crash inside instead. Zyra sighed. I really regret hiring you. Kato grinned. Too late now. With a sudden burst of engine power, the stolen craft dove toward the warship's hull. Behind them, enemy fighters closed in, infiltrating the flagship. Kato twisted the controls, sending the ship spiraling through the enemy formation. Zyra fired the ship's forward cannons, blasting a hole in the warship's docking bay. Brace yourself, Kato shouted. The ship slammed through the breach, skidding across the hangar floor before crashing into a pile of cargo containers. Alarms blared. The air filled with smoke and flashing lights. Kato groaned. Still alive. Zyra unstrapped herself. Barely. Outside, armed guards were already approaching. Kato grabbed his pulse rifle, kicking the cockpit door open. We need to move. Zyra hacked into a nearby terminal, reactors 5 decks down. We need an elevator or a maintenance shaft. Kato checked his rifle's power cell. Half charge, it would have to do. A squad of heavily armored enforcers blocked their path. Their leader's helmeted faceplate tilted slightly. "Surrender now, and you'll live." Kato grinned. "You know, people keep saying that to me." He pulled the trigger. A single shot, straight to the leader's visor. The battle erupted instantly. The last stand. The corridor became a war zone. Kato moved fast, dodging incoming fire, returning shots with deadly precision. His military training kicked in, every movement efficient, every kill clean. Zyra fought beside him, using hacked security turrets to mow down enemy forces. They pushed forward, cutting through the warship's defenses like a storm tearing through steel. Then, the main doors to the reactor chamber slid open. Inside, the core pulsed with energy, unstable from the ongoing battle. Kato scanned the room. Too many guards. No time for stealth. He glanced at Tyra. "Think you can overload it?" She nodded. "But I'll need time." Kato cracked his knuckles. "Then I'll buy you some." One man against an army. Kato stepped forward, gun raised. The guards inside turned, surprised. He fired first. One down, then two, then three. More guards swarmed in, weapons blazing. Kato dodged, weaved, took cover behind a power conduit. He was outnumbered, outgunned, no way to win. But he didn't need to win. He just needed to hold the line. Zyra's final move. Behind him, Zyra worked furiously, bypassing security locks, rerouting power, forcing the reactor into critical overload. "Almost there," she shouted. Kato reloaded his rifle. One round left. Then, the room shook violently. A massive explosion rocked the warship, sending enemy troops flying. Zyra turned, her face pale. The overload set. "We have minutes before the whole thing goes critical." Kato grinned. Perfect timing. Escape and the end of Vostal. They ran. The warship began to collapse as the reactor spun out of control. Alarms blared. Doors malfunctioned, locking troops inside. Kato and Zyra reached the hangar bay and stole the last remaining fighter craft. Kato hit the thrusters. The ship launched forward, blasting out of the bay just as the entire warship detonated. The explosion tore through the fleet, sending debris scattering through space. Vostal's transmission cut off mid-sentence. His flagship was gone. The war was over. The aftermath. Kato and Zyra watched from a distance as the last of the enemy fleet retreated. Zyra let out a slow breath. "It's over." Kato nodded. "Yeah." A moment of silence passed. Then, Zyra smirked. "You know, I still haven't paid you." Kato laughed. "I think I'll settle for not being dead." She chuckled. "Good, because I'm broke." Kato sighed. Figures. They turned their ship toward the human sector, leaving the battlefield behind. They weren't heroes, but they had changed the course of history. And that was enough.